friends, it's Margaret, and it's time for my October wrap-up. There is not a lot of battery left on my camera, so I'm going to go straight into the stats and then into the books that I read. As usual, I will be splitting this wrap-up up by the format that I read said book in. So in the month of October, I read 10 books. I read 1 graphic novel, 6 audiobooks, and 3 physical books. Of those books, 2 of them were middle grade and 8 of them were YA, and then I read 2 5-star books, 5 4-star books, and 3 3-star books this month. Starting out with the graphic novels, I read The Amazing Spider-Man, Renew Your Vows, Volume 1, Brawl in the Family. So in this particular novel, it follows Peter Parker and his wife, Mary Jane Parker, and their daughter, Annie May, and all of them, thanks to some helpful technology, have powers. Annie May obviously inherited them from her father, but Peter has also figured out a way that he can share his powers with MJ. There's some device that he has come up with. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I did feel it was a little bit repetitive because the first 3 issues were just the same event being repeated from different points of view. So you had Peter's point of view, you had Mary Jane's point of view, and you had Annie May's point of view. Granted, all 3 of them did experience separate events in their day, and it all led up to one event, but it still felt a little bit repetitive. I wanted to know what happened next, not keep jumping back into the past to see what had happened earlier in the day. Pete and MJ have a dynamic that I have always enjoyed. The one thing that I really didn't like about this is that when MJ was frustrated, she would and I know it was joking, but she'd be like, I'm going to strangle you, both to Peter and to Annie May, and I was just like, I feel like, okay, yes, I could see her saying that to Peter. I don't see a parent saying that to their child, though, so that felt a little off. Also, there is a volume that came before this. Apparently, there was like a one-off or one-shot kind of volume thing. However, for the most part, I felt like you didn't really need that to read this. There just were a couple of places where I was like, I wish things had been a little bit better explained, considering people would have been picking this up just by itself. If the lighting is different, my battery did indeed die like 2 minutes into this, so here we are again. Technology hating me out of the way, it is time to move on to the audiobooks that I read this month. Like I said, I read 6, the first of which was An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I understand why some people didn't necessarily enjoy it. The world building in this one was not all that heavy, but I think Margaret Rogerson really went into this story kind of assuming that you knew some things about the Fae. There wasn't a lot of explaining, and I like that. I like the fact that we just get straight into the story and straight into the romance. Isabel is the painter for the Fae, and this fairy lord named Rook comes in to have her paint his portrait. They kind of end up bonding over the course of her painting this portrait. Unfortunately for both of them, she accidentally ends up painting human sorrow into his eyes. That is a big no-no, obviously, because if you know the Fae, any sign of weakness is just like inviting trouble. Again, I really enjoyed it. I thought the romance was really well paced. We get a lot of it brushed over at the beginning, like you know that they are developing these feelings for each other at the beginning, but she doesn't really go into depth, but then you get to see it really work out through the course of the novel. It's less her getting sent to be on trial and more kind of a quest across the land of fairy, because as they go off into fairy, they end up running into some issues and some trouble. If you're looking for a book where the focus is more on the relationship and the actual plot than it is on the world building, this is a great book for you. I already know a lot of the mythology behind the fairies. I've already read a lot of books with them in it. I didn't feel the need for all of the world building that I know a lot of people would have liked to have in there. I was more interested in the actual story that was happening and these 2 characters as they're trying to not die. The next audiobook that I read was The Red Pyramid by Rick Riordan. This was the pick for our Demigods Anonymous for September, I think it is. I don't know, we're just kind of a little bit out of sync. This is about Sadie and Carter. They're 2 siblings, and they have been separated for the last 6 years. Carter lives with his dad. Sadie lives with their grandparents. Their grandparents did not want to take Carter in for reasons that make me angry, and so he's been going around traveling the world with his father, who is an archaeologist that specializes in ancient Egypt. He and his dad only get to see Sadie on Christmas Day. However, at this time, his dad ends up going missing in the middle of their visit with Sadie, and so he and Sadie end up having to team up to find their dad and possibly save the world. I will say it again, The Kane Chronicles is so underrated. I really like this book. I think I like it even more this time around than I did the first time I read it. I really got to appreciate a lot of this stuff and a lot of the ways that Rick has grown. I think if we're talking about Rick Riordan as he is in the present versus when he wrote this series, I think with what he's shown through Rick Riordan Presents, I don't know that he would have written this book. I think he probably would have given this to someone who shares the background that Sadie and Carter did. However, I did feel it was pretty well done. There were not a lot of places where I went, oh yes, these 2 black characters were written by a white man. I do like some of the discussions that he brought into. You see a little bit of a discussion about colorism, which is something that I don't think a lot of white people are aware of, or they dismiss the effects of it, but you really get to see it in Carter's case. I love the system he came up with for the Kane Chronicle. This is not Percy Jackson 2.0. He like actually sat down and thought about a different way for these kids to interact with the deities that are being focused on in this book. It is a Rick Riordan book, which means it got 5 out of 5 stars. The next audiobook that I finished was The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is a reread in preparation for Queen of Nothing, which is coming out in like, you know, it might be coming out the Tuesday after this video goes up. I think that's how the schedule is working. As you are watching this video, I am probably just like vibrating in my very molecules because I am 2 days away from finding out how this story is going to end. She grabbed me by the throat with the cruel prince and has not let me go since. Oh. I gave this book 5 stars in case anyone is wondering. Yes, I know that makes me trash. I don't care. I enjoyed this fully. I will refer you to my How I Rate Books video so you know how I rate books. This is about Jude Duarte, and she has grown up in Fairy. Her adoptive father came like 10 years ago and slaughtered her parents because her mother was originally married to him and has taken his child and gone and married a mortal man. He didn't like that very much. However, mortals are not treated all that well in Elfheim, which is the fairyland that this book is based in. So Jude spends most of The Cruel Prince trying to get some semblance of power, trying to find some way that she can protect herself from all of these fae who see cruelty as the highest form of art. I guess some of them come to question that over the course of the 2 books, especially in this book. I think we see sides of a character that we didn't see in The Cruel Prince, and it makes me like him even more. And listen, I love these 2 so much. They are both absolute disasters. I wish they'd had better parents. I feel like if they'd had better parents, we would have had a power team right from the very start. But oh my gosh, this book is so much fun, but also so frustrating. Jude and kind of her nemesis, Carden, spend almost all of this book working towards the same goal, but without consulting each other. Like, they still think they're enemies in this book, and it is just like, you know, if you had figured out that you need to work together, so many things would be different, and life would not suck so much. I cannot wait for Queen of Nothing. I think we finally gotten to the point where there can be a mutual respect between them. I'm ready for it to go there. Okay, guys, I'm ready. The next audiobook that I read was Passenger by Alexander Bracken. This is one of the ones that I read for that secret TBR I mentioned. I'm not going to tell you what that secret TBR is, but I figured I'd at least mention it since I haven't gotten it up yet, because I haven't finished all of the books. It's fine. Life is a mess. This is about Edith Spencer, and she is preparing for a violin concerto, performance, recital. I don't entirely remember what the word was, but she's preparing to perform this really complex violin piece because she's one of the premier violinists of her age. She's getting ready for her debut. She's very excited for this. And then people show up and kidnap her and take her back to like 1776. There she meets Nick, who is also a time traveler, although 1776 is his natural timeline. He is charged with taking her to his grandfather so that she can help them retrieve an artifact that her mother has hidden, and they need this artifact for nefarious schemes. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I had so much fun reading this. I do understand what people mean when they say that it was a little info dumpy at the beginning of this. Sometimes the conversations were a little bit clunky, but all in all, it was a really enjoyable story, and it had an ending. It had an ending that had me a little worried for a very long time, and then I was like, wait, there's a book 2, why am I worried? Oh, I was just like, I was going through it at work when I finished this book. I had a moment. It was not a fun one. It was not. I really liked how this explores different timelines. It explores how Nick is treated in different timelines because Nick is black. It's really interesting to see how he gets treated in these different periods of time that they go to, and it's also interesting to see Etta kind of have to wake up to the fact that he cannot move through society and through what they're doing as easily as she can as a white woman. Just so much of this book was spot on. It was fun. It was enjoyable. Compared to her other writing, this was very obviously a debut, but I do feel like it was a very solid debut. She gives you a great plot, great characters, and a really interesting, like, twisted premise that you're having to go through. And the next audiobook I finished was also for my secret TBR, and that was This Mortal Coil by Emily Suvada. You guys are sitting there going, what the heck are you reading? Because we went from time travel fiction to a dystopian, gene-hacking novel. I, again, loved this, and the ending, again, wrecked me. This was the third time this month that a secret TBR book had me going, what if I just completely forgot what I wanted to read this month and read the sequel. This is about Kat, and she has spent the last year basically surviving on her own. Her father was dragged off. He was a very world-renowned scientist in the field of gene hacking, because in this particular dystopian future, people can hack genes. They have things implanted in their arms that allows them to change how they look. It allows them to do things with their body that help with illnesses. I didn't necessarily understand all of it, but you don't have to understand all of it to enjoy the story. There were a couple of places that I zoned. I still gave this 4 out of 5 stars though, because I really enjoyed it. It was a really solid plot. Kat has been hiding from Cartaxis because her dad basically said, if they get a hold of you, they will use you to make me do things that I don't want to do. So she's been in hiding, and then a Cartaxis soldier shows up going, your dad is dead. He has a vaccine for this zombie virus that has been eating. Oh yeah, that's right. There's an exploding zombie virus, guys. I forgot that part. They have the vaccine. It's been encoded into his DNA, and so he needs Kat to help undo it. That's the last task her dad gave him. Her dad left something that said, go find my daughter here, and she will help you figure out how to deploy the vaccine. Distribute? I think the word is distribute that I'm looking for. This had some plot developments that I'm not sure how I feel about still, even weeks after having finished it, but I loved every minute of it. I had so much fun with it. It really, really has you going. It really has you on the edge of, it really had me at least, on the edge of my seat, wondering how they were going to solve these issues that they were running into. A lot of it is just kind of this cross-country trip going up to Canada because the lab they need is in Canada, and they keep running into these Cartaxis people who want to take them and stuff them underground because that's where everyone lives now. I loved the world building. I felt like it was a really interesting take on kind of a zombie cannibalism plot. It's a little weird. It's gonna make you go, wait, what? At the very beginning, people do that? But at the same time, it really did a great job of exploring what people will do to survive and the lines that we are willing to cross sometimes. The final audiobook that I read in October was Fountains of Silence by Rita Sepetys. This is about Anna and Daniel. Daniel is the son of a wealthy oil tycoon. He and his family are vacationing in Madrid, Spain. His mother was actually born in Spain, so they've come over to Spain to kind of spend the summer there. Daniel is really into photography, but his father wants him to run the family business, so he's decided to spend this summer trying to find the picture that will win him this contest and will pay for his way into J school. Anna is one of the workers at the hotel where Daniel and his family end up staying. She's lived in Spain all her life, and she is actually the daughter of a Spanish Republican, which makes life very difficult because Spanish Republicans are kind of treated like they have the plague at this point in Spain. I ended up giving this 3 stars. I really did enjoy it, especially the first part of the book. The part this takes place when they are teenagers, I really, really liked. Now, I will say I want to reread this because I feel like listening to the audiobook, although it was a really good audiobook, I think it kind of took me out of the story. There are snippets of, hold on, let me see if I can find one. There are snippets in here of actual historical documents of interviews that happened from different diplomats and people who worked between the US and Spain, because the US actually worked with Spain at that time, even though it was under a dictatorship. They had ambassadors over there. They were making deals with Spain, trying to kind of alleviate the suffering of the Spanish people is what they were saying, but really it was all about money. Some of those were from historical records, like you would just get the name of the historical record and the author who wrote it, but some of them were from websites, and it was really weird to have this book that takes place in 1950 and then have a www. Yada yada yada, a whole bunch of numbers.com. That took me out of the story quite frequently, and then I felt like the second half, because there's a second half following older characters, I felt like the tone needed to change, and it didn't. It still felt very much like I was reading from the perspective of teenagers, even though these people are 36 years old. I actually feel like the amount of time between the first part of the story and the second part of the story, I just felt like it was a little bit too much for the ending to be believable to me. I do understand why it was so much time on a storytelling, math basis, but it didn't feel as satisfying as I would have liked it to be. Still, I do really recommend it. It is really real well written, and I like the fact that they actually had a Spanish narrator who has I believe it is the Castilian accent. I want to say, I'm not 100% sure if that is correct, but going off what my Spanish teacher told me in my high school Spanish class, it is the Castilian accent. Could be wrong though, so don't come for me if I am. This was a long time ago that I learned these things. Moving on to the physical books. The first physical book that I read was Saddle Club #1, Horse Crazy by Bonnie Bryant. This is about Stevie, Carol, and Lisa. There are 3 girls who are all taking riding lessons at Pine Hollow Stables. Lisa is the newcomer of the group, and basically is about Lisa trying to figure out who is a good friend in this group, and Also, it has horses. I read these books when I was in middle school. I absolutely adored them. This is another secret TBR book. Again, you guys are probably wondering what the heck the secret TBR is about because it has so many random different books on it. But I read these books in middle school. I really enjoyed them. I actually tried the YA series, and then they killed off one of the horses, and I was like, nope, I am done. I don't know. It's funny because I don't know if I read this book. I remember one specific plot point that happens in this book, but I don't remember any of the rest of it. So I might have read it, or I might have heard of it in one of the other books because I didn't entirely read these in order. They were not exactly in order at my library. I thought that this was good for what it was meant to be. This is really great if you have a kid who is into horses. This is really great if you're looking for something to teach your kids about friendship, to teach your kids about bullies. Obviously, it was not written for someone who was my age range, but I still enjoyed it. It was still a nice walk down memory lane. The final secret TBR book that I read this month, not the final book, but the final secret TBR book was Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I ended up giving this, what did I give this? I ended up giving this 4 stars. It was not as terrible as I thought it was going to be. Book Twitter had me thinking that this was going to be the worst written, like, whitest of white books out there, and it was just, you know, par for the course in YA fantasy. You know, before YA writers were like, oh, maybe I should actually let people know that there are people of color in my books instead of just assuming they will feel representation on the page when I say it posthumously when the book is finished. I'm not dragging anyone there. This is about Selena Sardathian. She's an assassin who was betrayed and has spent the last year in these working mines as a slave. I'm not entirely sure, like, salt mines. I believe it was salt mines. And it starts out when the Crown Prince of Adarlan shows up with one of his guards and is like, hey, there's this competition to be my father's champion. I'm going to put you in it, and you are going to win. And I'm not entirely sure. I think it was something about getting one up on his father. I don't know. I read the book. It was good. I will say I was not surprised to find out that this was written on Fiction Press. The writing is very typical of what you would find on Fiction Press, which is the original fic version of fanfic.net. It had a lot of repetition that is par for the course when you're reading fanfic, just because it can be months between chapters. And so you will have stuff rehashed over and over and over again. I thought that she had interesting characters. I thought that she had a really interesting plot and premise. It wasn't so much about the competition. A lot of it was about Selena trying to figure out, how do I live in this society that hates so much of what I am. Adarlan is kind of like an empire nation, and she is from one of the conquered peoples that his country kind of came in and annexed. One of the characters that I really enjoyed is actually the princess of one of the countries that is still independent of Adarlan, and she was really fun to get to know. She knew more than she was letting on, and I knew it. I knew that she did. It's funny, I feel like this bugged me a little less than A Court of Thorns and Roses did when it comes to the romance, just because, like, things that I know that are going to happen, because you can't be on the internet and not get spoiled. But, like, I felt like this one bugged me a little bit less. I had less of a feeling of, like, this being pointless the way I did when I finished A Court of Thorns and Roses, because it was all building towards something that I can't tell you about, but I know about. Like, just know that I enjoyed it. It was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I will have a lot of thoughts about this book that I will talk about when we get to the reveal of the secret video TBR. That's it. And the final book that I read in October was Serpent Dove by Shelby Maher. I ended up giving this 3 stars. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't quite what I was expecting. This is about Lou Enreed. Lou is a witch, and she has left her coven because something has happened that left her ostracized. She's hiding from them, basically, because if they find her, bad things will happen. And then you have Reed, who is a chasseur, and their job is to hunt witches and to burn them. And through a series of hijinks, they end up married. Neither of them are happy about this fact. Reed doesn't know that she is a witch. She knows what he is. He doesn't know what she is. And so chaos ensues from there. I ended up giving this 3 stars. It was not my favorite book. It was not quite what I was expecting. I will say I really enjoyed Lou and then eventually Reed as characters. Lou very much knew her mind, knew what she wanted to do, and wasn't going to let anybody walk over her. I appreciated that about her. I appreciated the fact that she is very in touch with who she is and proud of that fact. Reed had some growing and learning to do, and he did. And so I do like where we leave him at the end of the story. I was a little frustrated by him at the beginning of the story. But there are a couple of things that I wasn't particularly all that big a fan of. I gave it 3 stars, which means I liked it, but I didn't love it. Number one, they sold this as a lot of enemies to lovers, but I felt like the development of the relationship between Reed and Lou didn't really develop in an arc. It just, you had they hate each other, and then all of a sudden the feelings change, and that bugged me a little bit more because it led to this imbalance of power that I was not the biggest fan of. And then on top of that, I felt like, I don't want to spoil things, but like, I felt that Lou ended up apologizing for things that she did not need to apologize for. It kind of just reeked of the fact that women and people of color quite often have to downplay their feelings to cater to someone with more privilege and to kind of make peace with that. And I felt like Lou should not have had to apologize for anything, or at least not what she was apologizing for when she was apologizing. So that irked me, the fact that the relationship just didn't really develop in a way that I felt was healthy or constructive, although I did there were two separate parts, and like I liked both parts, but I needed more connection between the two of them, and then I just needed her to not apologize for the crap that happened. I'm also going to link Jessie from Bow Ties and Books review. They have a lot of really interesting points. I didn't pick up necessarily on all of them, but what Jessie brought up is still stuff that you should be aware of and you should think about. So that is everything that I read in the month of October. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel and you like videos that talk about books and writing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That is it for now, my friends. Happy reading, and I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye!